This is Rough Drafts Welcome.
The podcast where you can mess up, and we can too.
I'm Sachiko.
And I'm Erin.
And together with the editors at Salt and Sage Books,
we're changing the face of storytelling, one rough draft at a time.
We're glad you're here. Let's get started.
As you can see, I am flying solo today, and I'm excited to talk with you. So as I was thinking about things that I wanted to talk about today, knowing that it was just going to be me, the thing that kept coming up in my mind was all of the ways that my brand new writers really struggled as brand new sweet little babies when I was teaching my creative writing classes in high school. So I was teaching, it was 9th and 10th graders at that point. And this was the first time most of them had taken a creative writing course. And it was really interesting for me to see the things that they came like preloaded with, the stuff that they already knew, quote unquote, about the writing industry and how to be creative, and the ideas that they already had in their minds of what it took to be an author or to be a creative. And some of them were really excellent things to have in your brain. And then some of them I felt like were kind of problematic. So I want to talk to you about the problematic things that come. I think I'm going to title this episode something like Ignore This Writing Advice or something along those lines. But that's the basic idea. Is I want to tell you some of the things that I have noticed specifically in beginning writers, but in the writing community as a whole, it shows up a lot of the time where people will say, well, how do I deal with this problem? And then you get all of these pieces of advice and they show up pretty regularly. And I don't think that any of them are actually necessary to being a good writer or to being a creative person. So that's what I want to talk about. And now that we've done the introduction, let's go. So the first thing that I would say my students thought about really intensely was this idea that they had to have a really good idea for a book. They had to have and not just like a good idea, but it had to be marketable and zingy and really high concept, and like easy to pitch. And all of those things are wonderful to do. I'm not trying at all to say that if you have high concept, super good idea books, that they're not important. I think they're pretty fabulous. And if you have that, rock on. But for most of my students, what we struggled with around this idea was their feeling that they had to have the idea totally figured out and that it had to be really good. And in addition, they had to know what was going to happen the whole way through. Now, obviously, if you are a plotter and that sort of style of writing really appeals to you, rock on, plot your way through. We've talked about this before. I am a planster where I have a little bit of a plot, but then I've found that as I'm sitting down to writing, if I'm trying to write according to an outline, my writing veers wildly off of the outlined path. So I do a super rough outline and then let myself kind of do whatever I want within that outline. But I really don't think that you have to have a super good idea. I think you can enter the writing process or the creativity process in a variety of places. So you might have a really cool world that you want to explore. You might have an interesting what if that you want to explore. You might have a character who you are very invested in. You might have a pitch. You might know exactly what you want this story to be. There might be like a specific scene in your head, and the story is how do we get there and what is happening and why does it feel so meaningful? There are so many different and interesting ways to approach the creative act of telling a story, whether you're doing that via prose or poetry or film or screenplay or whatever it happens to be. I don't believe that you have to enter it in one specific way. I don't think it's important to have a really good idea. I do think it is important to feel passionate about whatever you're doing. And if you don't feel passionate, to at least feel curious. For me, that is a more reliable thing that I can come back to, is a feeling of curiosity. and a feeling of investment in what I'm doing. So don't have a really good idea. Don't stress about that if you don't have one, but write about what you are curious about. Write about what makes you go, Write about the things that catch your attention. It can be people, it can be a character. Okay. Thing number 2 is the advice that you have to write every single day. So I see this everywhere, and I don't like it as advice. I understand where it comes from because there is this approach to writing that you have to treat it like a full-time job or a part-time, whatever. You treat it like a job, right? And in the same way that you would sit down and clock in hours if your job was on a computer, then you are quote unquote supposed to treat writing in that same way, that you are consistently working on it. The benefits of doing this are that you write more words, right? But to me, saying to a brand new writer, you have to write every single day is a really difficult sell. And actually, as a writer, I've been working, gosh, how many years have I even been a writer? I mean, I think I'm like over 20 years at this point that I have been writing. And I don't write every day at all. I really don't. And I actually find that incredibly restrictive, particularly because of the phase of life that I am in where I have younger kids. And when they were really little and they needed my attention 100% of the time, like there's no way I could have even recorded a podcast when my kids were little because they needed me, like unless they were asleep. And when they were asleep, I was usually trying to take a nap too because I was exhausted. So I don't find that to be helpful advice to write every single day. I've also seen people do the version of like, well, you know what a writer is? It's someone who writes. So if you aren't writing, then clearly you're not a writer. I hate that. I hate it so much because there were long periods of my life where writing felt completely out of my reach because I was too burned out, or my life was chock full of having a newborn, or I was going to school and taking like 24 credits. For some reason, I did that. And I also had a part-time job. And like sometimes there are phases in your life, for me at least, when writing every single day is not going to be an option. And I think that's okay. I don't think that makes you any less of a writer. It doesn't make you any less of a creative. And I will fight anybody who disagrees with me. This is a hill I will die on. I do not think you have to write every single day. That said, I do think it is important to prioritize writing in a way that feels right for you. So, for example, a friend and I are doing a sprint challenge right now. And if you guys are interested to hear more about it, let me know and I'll see if I can get her to come on the podcast and we'll talk about what we've learned. But we have been trying a sprint challenge where we write for 5 minutes every single day. That's it, just 5 minutes. I've been doing most of it on my phone and like in between things, right? Like I'm in the waiting room and my kid is back doing a thing and I'm hurrying and typing something out on my phone for 5 minutes, and just 5 minute sprints. I have been really, really surprised by how much I can write in 5 minutes, not necessarily like word count wise, but I have been surprised by that too. But also by this idea that just touching my story for literally 5 minutes didn't feel like enough to me before. And so I had in my mind that in order for me to like write every day, I had to like block out like 2 hours on my calendar every single morning. And I had to do it before housework because if I didn't, then that showed that like housework was more important than my writing, which no, that's not true. That's not true. Okay. If anyone is telling you that the order that you do things in shows like how much you value them, that I don't think that is true, because you do things in the order that allows you to thrive and allows you to survive. And if you are in a survival state, it is really difficult to create. Like if I were to come and sit down and get my writing done before I made sure that my kids like were up and had breakfast, my brain would really struggle to focus on what I was doing because the whole time I would be thinking, well, have my kids eaten? Are they eating? Are they just having that like marshmallow cereal that I hate but they love? So we buy it as a treat sometimes. Like all of those things would be going through my mind the entire time, and I would have a much more difficult time focusing on my writing. So I don't think that it's true that like, oh, you should put your writing first. But I also don't think it's true that you should necessarily like save your writing until the end of the day, unless that totally works for you. It totally works for me. I often get to the end of the day and feel excited to have something for myself. My point is, you don't have to write every day. You don't have to write for 2 hours every day. You don't have to write on a computer or on a typewriter or in your notebook. There is no one correct way to be a writer. And that also means there is no one correct way to write. There just isn't. There is no magic potion that will turn you into a perfect writer. It doesn't exist. So, writing every single day, I understand that it's well-meaning advice. I think that it can really easy turn into scrupulosity, and it can really easy turn into this sense of, well, I'm a writer. I have stories I want to tell, but I haven't written for 3 months. So I must not be a writer. And for me, that sort of feeling guilty about where I am is so deeply counterintuitive to my own creative process, not counterintuitive, counterproductive to my own creative process, that if I find myself getting in that rut, it's really difficult for me to get myself out. But if I have the idea instead that I write as much as I can when I can, that is a much more flexible and balanced way for me to approach it. So I don't like the advice to write every single day. If it feels good to you, good job. I'm happy for you. But please don't tell other people that they have to write every single day or they're not a writer, because that's simply not true. Simply not true. Okay, advice number 3 that I wish you would all ignore, especially as beginning writers, is any advice that is grammatical or sentencey in nature, like show, don't tell, and like don't use adverbs, stuff along those lines. To my mind, okay, in my experience, the first book or 2 books or 3 books or 5 books, whatever, the first books, stories, the first things that you create, probably not going to be very good. And that's okay. That is the point. The point is that you are trying this new thing. And if you can magically write a beautiful first draft, oh my goodness, I would love to know what your secret is. Because I feel like I've been chasing that my entire writer life, this idea of like a perfect first draft. It just doesn't exist. So instead, what I do instead of avoiding adverbs, avoiding showing, don't tell, is I have learned over my years as a writer by rereading my stuff, by editing my own stuff, the things that I personally struggle with, if you want to call it a struggle, the things that show up in my writing that are like the cues of my own particular voice. When I'm writing emotional scenes, for instance, especially around the climax, my prose tends to get very purple. And for those of you who don't know what purple prose is, it's just, well, like the adjectives and the adverbs really stack up and everything gets kind of flowery. And that is how I naturally write emotionally intense scenes. That is how it comes out of me. And I know that about myself. And I don't think that's a bad thing. It's how I draft. It's okay. And I like my voice. I like how I write. But I know that in my first draft, I'm going to go back to those scenes and I'm going to reread them with the eye of a reader and of an editor. And I'm going to be making some edits. I'm going to be making some changes. And that for me is a much more holistic way to approach it. Instead of trying to stop the way that you are writing when you're in that flow state, I wouldn't focus on that personally very much. What I would do instead is let it flow and then hone your editing process after the fact to be able to understand your own like quirks as a writer and understand your own personal voice. And then you can go back and edit what you have written into something that you are more proud of. And that's good. I honestly think that being able to edit your piece is more of a skill than being able to draft a beautiful first piece. And you'll find too that the more that you edit and the more that you're aware of your own little quirks, that gradually the way that you write will start to shift. And that's really beautiful too. And that is how you improve as a writer. So I don't think it's super good advice to avoid adverbs, to show, don't tell. I think that's all really good advice when it comes to revision. I don't find it helpful advice for drafting at all. Okay, the next thing is this idea that you are only writing good words when your words are flowing, or like when you're in flow state. I need to get a drink. Hang on. Okay. I think this is complete garbage. And I'll tell you why. So the first year that I did NaNoWriMo, which is National Novel Writing Month, which, if any of you don't know, it is a nonprofit organization. They're wonderful. I like them so much. And I love the NaNoWriMo community. It's incredibly supportive. It's NaNoWriMo. So it's the month of November, and the goal is to write a 50,000 word novel within the month of November, with the idea being that you write 1,667 words every single day. And that if you can write a book in November, you can write a book any month, because November is so chock full of doing all of the things. It's such an intense, holiday heavy month. So the first time that I ever did NaNoWriMo, I really tried. I was super involved in the community, and I saw somebody post about the day 14 slump. And what they were saying is that every time that they do Nano, they notice that day 14 for them is really difficult. It doesn't matter how good they felt about the words for the 2 weeks before then, they get to day 14 and they're like, oh, I hate all of this. I have just written complete garbage. And then their advice was you push through day 14 and then day 15 feels better. So based on that, it got my Excel brain churning. And so I started to keep track of when I was writing a thing where I started to feel like, oh, this is garbage. Oh, this isn't flowing. Every single word is torture. And for me, I found it happens more at a word count pace and less at a on a specific day. With NaNoWriMo, for me, it happens day 13, 14, and 15. And then it happens again on day 17. And then it doesn't happen again until like day 28. And then it happens on day 29 as well. So, but for me, it's a word count thing now that I've written more and I paid attention more. I want to stop writing at around 10,000 words every single time. I'm just like, yep, we're done. This story's not going anywhere. I hate it. We're done. We're done. 10,000 words. No more. And then I feel it again around 25 to 30,000 words, somewhere in there. And then I feel it again right about 45. And then I feel it again, say if I'm writing like a 50,000, I feel it again at 45. And then the last like 3 chapters for me are pure torture. I hate writing those last 3 chapters. They do not flow. They are really difficult for my brain. I don't like writing them. They are so hard. But the things that I have noticed about this, and in knowing myself and knowing my own patterns, is that the days where I feel like the writing is garbage, when I go back and reread the story to do an editing pass, I can't ever find that garbage spot. So for me, the process of actually writing might feel like I am just putting out pure trash, right? But then when I actually go back and I read it, it was actually pretty good. It was actually pretty good. And it's actually pretty consistent the whole way through. So I don't think that it's true that your writing has to flow or that you have to feel good about the stuff that you have written in order to write something that is good. I think it is just as possible to show up and write and have it feel awful to you and still have it be good in the end. So entering flow state is great, but I think that so much of the real skill of being a writer is being able to sit in that space where you're like, this is horrible and feels awful. I'm getting no pleasure from this, 0 dopamine available, and I'm going to do it anyway. That grit, I think, is more important to a writer's success and ability to finish a story and ability to write a story and whatever else you might say. That grit for me is more important than pretty much any other skill out there, because the more you write, the better you're going to get at it. So I don't think you need to have flow in order to write good stuff. If you do get flow, I'm so happy for you, because it is a magical place. Enjoy it while you're there. But I would not let that hold you back from writing anyway. Write the stuff that you feel like is trash, because often you're not even going to be able to tell that you thought that it felt so horrible while you were writing it. Okay, and the very last thing that I think you should ignore, especially as a brand new writer, is this. I don't like this one at all. It makes me feel so frustrated. Is this idea that you have to come up with a completely new idea or something that has never been written before. Listen, unless you have written the exact same concept before, it has never been written before. Hear me so clearly. Unless you have taken, I don't even know, Cinderella and Phantom of the Opera and smashed them together at this precise moment in your life, and you have written that story already. Literally, it has not been written before because the way that you approach the story is going to be different than the way that any other person would approach the story. So have you think about the like on Instagram and TikTok a lot where you'll see people say, I'm going to redraw this in my current style. I love the ones where they show you over the years how their drawing style has changed, like redrawing something from 5 years ago, redrawing something from 10 years ago, right? And I love it when you can see like, okay, here's the piece that I drew when I was 10. I redrew it when I was 15. I'm redrawing it at 20, and here I am at 25, and I'm going to redo all of it and look at the way that I have changed my approach. To my mind, writing is the exact same idea. That, I mean, do you know how many people have rewritten the hero's journey with a magical, beautiful elf with strangely long blonde hair? Come on. Come on. All stories have already been told. And that's fine because you haven't told the story yet. You haven't approached it yet. And the way that you are going to approach it is completely different. If I were to, I actually did this a little while ago. I took a story that I wrote when I was 21 when I drafted it, and I redid it. I've self-published it actually under a pen name, but the things that I changed, it is such a different story now. The story is quote unquote the same. Like the plot is still pretty similar. It's still pretty much there. But in the rewriting, because I am a different person now, I am a better writer now. I know more about the world now. I understand things differently now than I did then. And that's not to say that my original one wasn't good, but the point being that you can take the exact same idea as someone else and you can write it in a completely different way that will be a completely different story. Think about how many different Beauty and the Beast retellings there are. It's all the same story. Doesn't mean that I haven't read every single one of those retellings and enjoyed them all immensely because they're so different, because they are written by different people. So the exercise that I would do with my students to talk about this is I would say, all right, I want you to just close your eyes and you are going to imagine a park bench. Whatever that looks like in your brain, imagine a park bench. And on that park bench, someone is going to come and sit down on that park bench. Just imagine what they look like. Anything that you're imagining is perfectly fine. Okay. And then an animal approaches the person on a park bench. Doesn't matter which animal it is. Doesn't matter, any of the things. Now, pause and write down exactly what your brain came up with, right? And so they would all write it down. And then we would go around the room and we would talk about, okay, so like what animal approached your person? Oh, it was a bird. Oh, mine was a dog. Oh, mine was like a deer. And what did your people look like? Some of them were old, some of them were young, some of them had gender, some of them did not have gender. Some of them were, I don't know, students. Some of them were, I don't know, a ghost. I think in one case, actually, that a kid was like, I wrote a ghost sitting on mine. So like you can take the exact same prompt and create utterly different worlds. You can even do it with a simple thing like close your eyes and imagine a dog. Every single person in the room is probably going to picture a different dog. And as soon as you add a little bit more context to it, you say, okay, and what is the dog doing? Suddenly all the dogs are doing different things. Okay, and what is the dog's name? What color is the dog? So I think that you can trust, even if someone tells you like, oh, this has been done before. I despise that as feedback. Just because it has been done before does not mean that it cannot be done well by you, because you are bringing a unique touch to the story that it has never had before. So I feel very frustrated. Well, and that makes it sound like I'm mad about it, but like I feel sad, honestly, when my students would tell me like, I just can't come up with an idea. Everything that I can think of has already been written. And I'm like, yeah, no kidding. Everything has already been written. And that's okay because none of it has been written by you yet. You can put your own spin on things, your own twist on things, and that counts. That counts. That's good enough. If you ever want to feel really reassured about this, go to any bookstore, online or in person, and ask them for a fairy tale retelling. They will take you to a place where there are so many fairy tale retellings, you won't even know what to do with yourself. Like Little Mermaid in space. Like there are so many different things that you can do, but you're the one who gets to do them differently. I hope that feels encouraging and not discouraging. I really don't think there is such a thing as an original story, but I think there is such thing as an original perspective. Yes. Okay. And then I have a little bit more time. So I'm going to give you my little bonus thing, which is that you have to take a creative writing course, attend a conference, or have a degree in writing in order to be a writer. This is just not true. All of those things can be helpful, and especially if you struggle with things like if writing every day or writing consistently or gaining confidence, if those are things that are really holding you back in your writing life, it can be so helpful to take a course where you are required to turn in pages. And it can be so helpful for you to attend a conference where you are surrounded by other people who have the same goal as you and you can get really inspired. And it can be even really nice to get yourself an MFA because, again, of that same thing, that I think the benefits of those things is that it discusses with you. First of all, it creates a sense of community. It creates an opportunity for you to see the perspectives of other people. And it can help you develop that sense of it's okay for other people to read my stuff. Hard. Still not my favorite thing in the world, but it gives me anxiety. Rather, I feel anxious about that. But you don't have to have any of those qualifications in order to be a quote unquote real writer. Those things can help and they can be helpful. They can have helpful things about them, but I don't think they're required. They're just not. That said, if you feel like some sort of a structured environment would be helpful to you in order to move forward in your writing career, then absolutely go and take those courses, go to those conferences, get yourself a degree. Like, that's wonderful. But for me, the benefit of those things comes from giving you that structure. I don't think that you will necessarily learn anything in those classes that you could not also learn from reading carefully, getting yourself critique partners, and honestly, just writing a lot. I think that there is intense value in just writing and writing badly and letting yourself write badly and being excited about the stuff, even when you know it might not be exactly what you want it to be yet, that it's still okay to feel proud of yourself for having accomplished the thing. Okay. I think that that's everything that I wanted to say. Really, what I want to see out of new writers is a sense of like belief in themselves. That's really what I want, is for these kids in these creative writing classes for the first time, or someone who's wanted to be a writer their whole life and they're just now sitting down to do it. What I want for all of you is for you to believe that you are worth listening to, and to believe that you have a story worth telling, and to believe that you are the only person who can tell it like how you would tell it. And that is absolutely worth pursuing. Okay, that's everything that I have for you today. Thank you so much for listening in. Have yourself a lovely day, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.
This has been Rough Drafts Welcome.
Thank you so much for listening.
Got any questions? We would love to hear them. Got a complaint? We'll hear it too.
Yep. Leave us a 5-star review. Pretty please, and thank you. And if you want to book with Salt and Sage Books or learn anything else about what we do, or if you want to work with us or take our courses or blah, 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 you can find us at www.saltandsagebooks.com, and we're all over social media too.
We sure are.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.